Hello, my name is Kendil Tariksha, and my student number is 999220748, and this is for RLG325 Visions and Revelations. I will be discussing the Arda Viraz Namag, which is an ancient Zoroastrian text, and furthermore, if it had a consolatory function for the early Zoroastrian community. Now, at a glance, one might think that since the majority of the text is filled with descriptions of sins and punishment, that this text is not comforting. I would like to quote some of these sins. So, on text page 25, you have Viraz, who is an individual that is sent to the other realm of the afterlife to understand and regain the knowledge which has been confused and lost in the real life due to the conquering and persecution of of the Zoroastrian community by Alexander. And the destruction has caused people to be confused about what they should follow religious-wise and how they can save their souls. So this is why Viraz goes through this journey to gain this knowledge. But firstly, yes, I would like to discuss about the sins, because majority of the text does talk about the sins and the punishments for the sins, and it's very descriptive and it's very, very disturbing. And so, again, on text page 24 to 25, I quote Viraz, who says, "And I saw the soul of a man whom they were scalping entirely, and were killing him cruelly. And I asked, what sin did this body commit, whose soul is undergoing such punishment? Shiraz the poet and the god Arda said, this is the soul of that wicked man who killed the poorest man in the world." End quote. That is one sin, and the punishment for that sin. So, the punishment for killing someone was the man getting scalped and killed. Another sin on page text 44 is a man who sodomizes and copulates with wives, and then he is punished for that. And then on text page 29 talks about lies, and 48 talks about women who lie, and then also talks about sorcery. So let me quote that one. So on text page 48, I quote Shiraz the poet. Text page 47, actually. "And then I saw the soul of a woman whose tongue was cut out, and whose eyes were gouged out by snakes and scorpions, and worms and other reptiles were eating the brain of her head. And from time to time she seized her own body with her teeth and chews the flesh. And I asked, what sin did this body commit? And Shiraz the poet and the god Arda said, this is the soul of that wicked woman who in her lifetime was a whore and practiced much sorcery and was a source of much mischief." So here you have also on text page 48, describing a woman who committed the sin of sorcery and her punishment. And another one I would like to quote is on text page 41, which is 40 and 41. And Viraz says, "And I saw the souls who had fallen down with their chests into the slime and stench, and sharp sickle went into their feet and other limbs, and they ever called for their fathers and mothers. And I asked, who are these souls, and what sins did they commit, whose souls are suffering such a great punishment? Shiraz the poet and the god Arda said, these are the souls of those wicked ones who in the world hurt their fathers and mothers, and did not in the world do penitence and ask for forgiveness of their fathers and mothers." End quote. Now, I mentioned these sins and the description of it to show you a gist of how cruel the punishments are and how harsh they are. But then, now if you focus on the sins themselves, you will realize that these sins are actually universal. these are actions that are universally despised, not only in the Zoroastrian faith, but many other religions, where killing someone is wrong. And at the time, having sex with other men and having sex with somebody else's wife was considered wrong. And lying is wrong, and treating your parents is wrong, and sorcery especially is wrong too. And another sin that I would like to discuss is on text page 27, which I found was very interesting. Now, because this is a sin, but this is also something that even if a society didn't have religion at all, this would be considered something unfair and unjust. So on page 27, you see that Viraz says, I saw a soul of a man who had constantly forced to eat dust and ashes that were measured with bushel and bucket. And I asked, what sin did this body commit, whose soul is undergoing such punishment? Shras the Poyas and the god Arda said, this is the soul of that wicked man who in the world did not keep the correct bushel and wine measure and weight and measurement. He mixed water with wine, and he put dust into grain and sold them at a high price to the people. He stole things from the good and robbed the people. So see, this is something about doing unfair and unjust business, unethical business with your customers, and dealing with money, which is more like stealing money. So you see, these are actions that are not liked and not acceptable in society. And this is why I feel that where this whole text obsession with sins and describing the punishments for those sins really kind of correlates to the fact that it is to help people, to guide them, that if they're not doing these things, not only will they be their souls will be safe in the afterlife, but also in the world it'd be easier for them to live in the real world with people of other faiths and cultures. And along with that, I would like to say, personally, I feel that this text has consolatory functions. There's some elements, and the reason why is if you focus on the text beginning where it talks about the good deeds that one can commit to achieve rewards in the afterlife. So one of them being is, sorry, one second. In text page 17, I quote, Viraz says, and then I saw the souls of the warriors comporting themselves with utmost joy and happiness in the splendid costume of commanders, and with the armor of heroes, well made, golden, studded with gems, well decorated, all adorned in the astonishing chariot in great glory and power and victory, and it seemed praiseworthy to me. So the description of the reward you get for being a good Zoroastrian believer is quite high, and it's something to look forward to. And another good deed that I wanted to focus on was on text page 15, where Viraz comes in contact where he says, and I saw the souls of those who in the world chanted the gathas and worshipped and were faithful. Now, this is also, I find, a very prominent verse, because this section of the text is discussing the people that reside in the highest level of heaven. And apparently the people that reside in the highest level of heavens are the ones that recited the gathas. So this is to convince the Zoroastrian people that they should not move away from the teachings of their ancestors and the Zoroastrian teachings and the Zoroastrian faith. And contrast to that, you see that the very first level of heaven that Viraz enters is called the level of the stars. And for that, it is mentioned that these people were just good people, and they didn't actually chant or do any of the religious things, and they still got into heaven. Yes, it's the lower level of heaven, but they did still get into heaven, which is kind of comforting to the Zoroastrian believers that were still alive at the time, the community who suffered a lot of loss and destruction of their religious texts, and who were unsure about how to practice their faith. And I find this is comforting for them to know that they can still go to heaven even though if they're not doing the religious activities that they once used to do. Because in a sense that the source, the Almighty, does recognize the hardship that they're in. And it's not hard to go to heaven. You just have to really be a good person. And another reason why I find this text to be actually comforting for the early Zoroastrian community is on text page 20, where Viraz says, I came across a place and I saw a big mighty river, difficult to pass, in which there were many souls and guardian angels, some of whom were not able to cross, and some were crossing with great difficulty, and some were crossing easily. And I asked, what is this river, and who are these people who are thus troubled? Shras the Poyas and the god Ajur said, This river is the many tears which men shed from their eyes, mourning their departed, and they mourn, grieve, and cry, and shed tears unjustly, and the river increases. Those who are not able to cross are those for whom after their passing much lamentation, crying, and mourning was made, and those who cross more easily are those who are less lamented. And tell those in the world, while you are in the world, do not unlawfully mourn and grieve and cry, for the souls of your departed shall receive that much harm and difficulty. And I feel that because of Zoroastrian, especially from the Muslim conquest, and in this text they mention about Alexander, but even later on, the Zoroastrian community was very much prosecuted and attacked and oppressed, that it would make a lot of the individuals in their community feel very helpless, depressed, and unwilling to live on, and especially if their loved one has passed away, it would be a grief too big for them to bear, for them to function normally. And I feel this part of the text is extremely important to help them realize that, you know what, yes, it hurts that your loved one has passed away, but just know that they've gone to a better place, and you want them to reach heaven, so you shouldn't spend too much time crying, and you should move on with your life. And we can even see in our current time, someone who suffers from depression, it can totally stop them from functioning normally, can disrupt their regular daily routine and activities. And during the past time, when there's already so much attacks attacks against the Zoroastrian community, that they really had to be on guard, and they really had to be able to withstand all the oppression and the tortures of these other foreign cultures and religions that were imposing on them. And I would also like to mention another aspect of this text is that I think we need to keep in mind that how we react and sympathize and empathize and express those feelings towards people that we see who are troubled or in distress is very different from in the past. This text is important and is taken seriously by many people still today, the Zoroastrian community that still exists today, because it has a bit of an authoritative tone. And because of this authoritative tone, it doesn't mean that it becomes less comforting. But in the past, maybe authoritative tone, having something that was able to be lead a group of people so distraught, it was important for them to have been spoken in such a manner. And I would feel that we should kind of cut this text into two different parts. One is just like, because we need to understand the journey was made to find out how to be a good Zoroastrian person. And within that, there are the elements that one can consider are comforting for the troubled Zoroastrian community. And in general, people turn to religion and they seek comfort in religion is because this is especially if your parents, like me specifically, my parents, my grandparents, and overall my ancestors, they were part of a religion and they were religious, and even I'm religious. And this is just the only way that they have learned to find comfort. And it is a sort of tradition and traditional way by seeking spirituality and religion to make ourselves feel better when times get tough. And because sometimes as well, we know that a lot of things that are bad that happen to us, we don't get justice for them. So having this hope that there is an afterlife where there's a system of reward and punishment, where there is the factor of justice that will be delivered if you were wronged, makes people willing to compromise and adjust to the difficulties and the stresses of the life they're living presently in the world. And with that, I think that's what I have to say. I do feel that this text does have a consolatory function, and it should not be mixed up or mistaken for being non-consolatory just because of the list of horrendous sins and horrendous punishments for those sins, because you know from the beginning of the text that this was supposed to also be a text that is a guideline for the early Zoroastrian community who feel that they're lost and they've lost their way. And I feel having a sense of knowing what is morally right and having ethics helps a person survive in the society that they live in. And also in general, we need to understand that as human beings, when we procreate or when we have kids, we try to help them survive in this world. And religion has been one of those things that has played such a huge important part in a lot of people's lives that it has become one of the coping mechanisms that we have. And this is why we also pass this down to our children and even our grandchildren, and then our offsprings continue this, because I personally do have faith and have belief in the afterlife, and it does definitely comfort me. And that is something that, even if you can't see the proof of it, and even if I can't see the proof of it, it is something that one feels. And there is a reason why this text till this day is being read and is being followed, because it really does deeply hit the Zoroastrian people, even currently, to their absolute core. And with that, I thank you for listening to me. Hopefully this isn't too long. I would also like to say it was a pleasure being in your class. This was my first lecture with you ever, and I found it extremely informative and insightful, and just the way you had structured the lecture was something I really, really liked, and I really appreciated because of how straightforward it was. And I hope that if you are teaching in the summertime, because this is my last year, technically August I graduate, that I get to be able to attend another class with you. Thank you once again, and I hope you have a wonderful week ahead. Hello, my name is Kendil Tariq Shah, and my student number is 999220748. And this is for RLG325 Visions and Revelations. I will be discussing the Arda Viraz Namag, which is an ancient Zoroastrian text, and furthermore, if it had a consolatory function for the early Zoroastrian community. Now, at a glance, one might think that since the majority of the text is filled with descriptions of sins and punishment, that this text is not comforting. I would like to quote some of these sins.